guys always say like they could, how they'd perform in a fight, even though they've never been in a fight, never taken martial arts, never been punched. You're like, oh yeah, I could, I'd beat him up. Like, no, you wouldn't.
Yeah.
Like, he'd knock you. And the same with survival. Like, oh yeah, just do so-and-so and be fine. And like, no, bro, like you probably would not. And there's so much misinformation out there too. And it's really terrible.
Well, if you take a look at this, I tented my pants. I've made myself a nice pants tent shelter, and this little guy may be Dunder Mifflin paper someday.
If you're watching this video, then that means you are aware enough to know that disaster can strike at any time. In this video, I interview Alex Bryant, a survival expert and founder of SARCRAFT. I encourage you to watch this whole interview as it could prepare you with the survival knowledge and the mindset that will equip you for whatever comes your way. If you believe that survival is a paramount skill in today's day and age, then go ahead and smash the like button and hit subscribe so more people can see this vital video. And now, let's learn all we can from Alex. Well, we are live then. All right, so Alex, how'd you get into survival?
So my background is I was in wilderness search and rescue for 10 years with a local fire and emergency services department. And so what we would do is go out and look for lost and missing persons. And, some of them were people who, it wasn't really their fault. Like they were either Alzheimer's patients, special needs kids, whatever. But a lot of them were traditional hikers, hunters, people going out to pick berries, going mountain biking, you name it, in the wild. And over time, I came to realize that if they had just a basic level of wilderness skills, then that dire emergency that they faced could have been just another good story to tell their buddies over a beer, like it didn't have to be an emergency. They could have self-rescued. And I'm talking like basics too. So that's really kind of what got me into the idea of teaching a lot of the skills that, one, that I learned in search and rescue, and two, that people need in the wild, be it what you just call basic wilderness survival, wilderness first aid, land navigation, plant identification, how to, what to carry, all those things. And because I realized that what I did in search and rescue, as much as I loved it, it was essentially reactive. So I decided to be proactive, and that's what got me started teaching.
Yeah, helping people so they can rescue themselves. So I like that. And I just made the connection that SARCRAFT is search and rescue craft, like the art of that.
Yep.
So
and that's turn to my camera. That's where the logo came from too, because that's on the insignia of pretty much every fire department in the country.
That's cool. That's awesome. Well, I've actually been lost a couple of times. I consider myself an outdoorsy person. I've probably gone camping, maybe 1,000 times. When I was in college, I used to go camping 2 or 3 times a week, which is crazy. I just love it. But when I was lost, my biggest issue is the navigation part. So maybe you can help me with this. I do know to follow a river that normally leads to civilization, but what else can you tell me about navigation, especially, if your phone doesn't work, or in my case, my phone died?
What you fell into is actually one of the most common causes of search and rescue calls that I ever encountered. Because it is interesting, because I was in there long enough, and when I was in there spanned the transition from everybody having flip phones to everybody having smartphones with apps. And I noticed when navigation apps and trail apps started hitting the scene, the number of lost hikers just went through the roof for that reason. In fact, I think, the last big search I was on before I left was for a trail runner who went out with nothing but his phone. That was all he brought. And, he didn't know the area. He'd never been there before. And the app he was using was out of date. And so he went on a trail that wasn't there. It had been bought by a private landowner, and he got rid of the trail. So, relying on your phone. I mean, I'm of the opinion, never trust your life to anything that involves batteries. Even a high quality GPS unit is no substitute for knowledge of a map and compass, because in SAR we carried like really nice GPSs. They would still glitch out. They would still lose signal. The batteries would still die. It was more of a backup to what we did with map and compass. So that's honestly the fundamental pillar of it. That's why, even to this day, the Army still uses map and compass. Search and rescue teams use map and compass. Professional adventure racers, people that like where it really matters, they may carry a GPS, but got to learn your way. Got to have a good local topographical map with a defined scale and a compass that matches that scale, and know how to orient the map, orient the compass, and then know your route, basically. So there's no substitute for that. But what you said, actually, if you don't have a map and compass and you do find yourself lost, that is a super valuable navigation technique that's called hand railing. And that's part of a broader concept called terrain association, where you look at the area around you and where you're at, and kind of find your bearings from there. And that's another trend that we saw change is, back in the day, people would go downhill when they got lost. Like you said, to go, because most people can figure out that if you follow a river long enough, you're going to find something that's going to give you a means to access the outside world. But nowadays, when people get lost, they go uphill because they're trying to find signal. So they can call out.
Oh no.
Yeah. So that's changed. But yeah, knowing how to terrain associate is valuable. And that actually kind of leads into what I think is one of the most underrated survival skills, which is just situational awareness. Just pay attention to your surroundings. What happens a lot is people will go, if they're hiking, they'll go down a trail and they won't look behind them. So when they turn around to come back out, that trail looks completely different, especially if it's like towards evening, different time of day, different lighting. Everything looks totally unfamiliar. Like,
yes.
This looks like nothing I've ever seen before. And they start to second guess themselves. And that's when they go, I'm on the right trail or not. Did I take a wrong turn? And they backtrack. They'll go off in the woods on something that looks like a trail, and then they're just lost. So situational awareness, trying to kind of get a really good feel for your surroundings. And it's harder when you're in a group and you're all hanging out and talking. Like, just still like kind of separate yourself, look around. Look for landmarks. Like, look for, watch the terrain change. Keep in mind, like, are you going uphill? Are you going downhill? Are you following a river? Is there anything unique? Like, is there a big weird looking rock outcropping, or is there some giant strange looking tree that you can kind of pinpoint? Like, those are all things you can do to help yourself avoid getting lost.
That's good. Now, did you hear about the guy that was lost and the search and rescue people kept calling his phone, but he didn't pick up because it wasn't a text?
Yeah.
Did you hear about that?
Yeah, they should have left him out there.
He's like, oh, these spam people spamming me.
At that point, if I was really lost, I'd pick it up even if it was a spammer and be like, look, hey, I know you're in another country, but you got to help me out here.
Send up.
Like, forward the call to somebody and like, just get me out of here. Yeah. We had something similar happen. Oh man, a guy called 911 and said he was lost, and then self-rescue. Like, he figured out how to get out, but he didn't tell anybody.
Man.
So we were all out there looking for him for hours and hours and hours. And finally, reverse 911, his phone called him like, hey, can you still get signal? He's like, yeah, I'm at home. Why are you calling me?
He's watching TV.
He's out here looking for you.
Golly.
He had to pay for his rescue. That we actually billed him.
Okay, well, there you go. So sheltering, tell me a little bit about that. Like, what do you recommend?
So honestly, the first and most important layer of shelter is your clothing.
And keeping your clothing dry when possible.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
But humans are the only species other than hermit crabs that actually carry their habitat around with them to maintain bodily homeostasis no matter where they go. So if you think about it, humans came from warm climates. Yeah. We've expanded across the globe. And, there's some places like in the northern hemisphere, if you have no clothes on, I think it's 56 degrees is the point where it gets too cold to survive the night when you're naked. If you don't have any kind of a fire, any kind of a shelter or anything. So, yeah, clothing is important. Layer up, pick items that will either dry quickly or keep you warm when wet, or actually just dress for conditions. Because I generally subscribe to the idea that cotton. Have you ever heard cotton kills?
No.
Oh yeah, because cotton, being an organic fiber, it really absorbs water quickly and it dries very slowly, so it doesn't wick moisture well at all. It's why, if you're wearing a cotton t-shirt and cotton jeans and you're out working in the yard on a hot day, you just sweat through it and it feels like it never gets dry and you chafe and all that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're wearing like some lightweight quick dry stuff, it won't do that. So I generally and the bad part is people get wet and end up with hypothermia. But so I generally subscribe to that. But even then, like if you look at like the Bedouins in North Africa, all they wear is cotton, just like layers and layers of loose, lightweight cotton because it's 120 degrees, but it's a dry heat. So dress for conditions, I guess is what I'm saying. Be aware of what you'll be facing, and then honestly prepare for the worst reasonable possibility for the time of year and the place that you're going out. If I were going out in North Georgia right now, as far as cold goes, if I'm going up on the Appalachian Trail up in the mountains, it is entirely possible there could be a seasonal thunderstorm, big rain come through, I get soaked, temperature drops 40 degrees. I'm still only really going to need like a long sleeve base layer and maybe a light jacket. But I will carry that, even though it's 95 degrees. So yeah, clothing, prepare for the worst. As far as your other methods of shelter, I always recommend carrying a space blanket. The Mylar emergency blankets, those are literally lifesavers. I've probably saved more people with that item than I have any other item in my med kit. I've given away tons of them. I've used them myself. They're indispensable. Yeah. The only downside is they are not breathable. So the natural moisture that condenses off your body, doesn't matter what time of year, whether you're cold or hot, it will condense inside that space blanket and it can get you wet and cold if you're not careful. But the benefits outweigh the cost. Yes. So always carry a space blanket. That's a perfect emergency shelter option for a lot of reasons. Another great emergency shelter is a garbage bag. One's big enough to fit yourself in. Keeps you dry, keeps you warm, keeps the wind off of you, does the job. If you're if you're backpacking or camping, you've already got your shelter. You ostensibly have a tent, a tarp, a hammock, something. If you're not, if I'm going out to hunt and if I know I'm not going to be staying overnight, or if I'm on a day hike and I'm not going to be camping, I still bring like a 10 by 10 ultralight sil nylon tarp and 25 feet of paracord, maybe some stakes. It only adds it's less than a pound for the whole thing. Yeah. It adds no weight to my pack. I can have an A-frame tarp shelter flown in, I've timed myself, I can do it in under a minute and a half. Primitive shelters are cool. But have you ever built a primitive shelter?
I have, and out of need too. So
there are a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this: when I got to the point I was camping so much where I tried to go camping without the things I needed, like I would literally go and just bring a jug of water and just see if I can camp, and I'd learn how to stay warm with pine straw and different things. Or I've done primitive shelters just for fun. Have you seen those people that do saran wrap and they saran wrap around trees?
I can't recommend that unless you're just going to carry it with you. Oh, I will tell you one thing that's along those lines that really does work though. That is the cloak, because I hate the term hacks because I've seen so many of the 20 survival hacks that'll save your life, even 20 killer survival hacks, but they'll actually get you killed.
Oh no!
But the one that I really believe in, that is the closest thing I can think of to a real hack, is called the Kohanski Super Shelter, because names for Morris Kohanski, who was a Canadian survival instructor. Very, very good at what he did. But what he figured out was you can take a piece of, it's basically plastic drop cloth, and line the inside of your tarp shelter with it, and then put a space blanket inside that to reflect heat from a fire that's in front of it. you can raise the temperature inside that shelter like 70 degrees above the surrounding temperature. Like I've done it on like sub-freezing nights where it was in the 20s and it got up close to 100 degrees in the shelter. You're basically making a greenhouse.
Man.
It's really cool. And you can sleep. You can get like a mattress cover or something and fill it full of leaves, make a browse bed, or just use like your ground pad and sleeping bag. And honestly, like you can sleep comfortably in a t-shirt and underwear outside of your sleeping bag in sub-freezing temperatures. It's insane.
That's pretty cool.
I love teaching that one because and you can build that with like a $5 Harbor Freight tarp and a $1.50 plastic painter's drop sheet from Home Depot and a twin mattress cover and some paracord, and you're set.
Yeah.
So it's super cool.
And what I would say too, which is why this interview is so important, is, if I had to bet my money on like a newbie with, $500 worth of REI gear, or like you with some stuff from the dollar store, like a $5 budget, I would vote for you. Surviving is a mindset. Talk to me a little bit about that. I think most people think they could survive, but when push comes to shove, I mean, they're not ready.
Well, yeah, that touches on a couple things. Like we had our conversation a few days ago, I really think that most people, men in particular, vastly overestimate their abilities when it comes to stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really stuff in that skill set. And I call it like the action hero complex. Because like,
yes. Yeah.
This is why, like, off the cuff, like all other things being equal, women are generally better shooters than men because men feel like they have to be good at it, so they choke and they're nervous about it. Whereas women are just out there to learn and have a good time. It's something similar. Guys always say like they could, how they'd perform in a fight, even though they've never been in a fight, never taken martial arts, never been punched. You're like, oh yeah, I could, I'd beat him up. Like, no, you wouldn't.
Yeah.
Like, he'd knock you. And the same with survival. Like, oh yeah, just do so-and-so and be fine. And like, no, bro. Like you probably would not. And there's so much misinformation out there too. And it's really terrible. I'm going down a squirrel trail here, but I was talking to this guy years ago and he was like, you know what the best survival tool is out of all of them? I was like, I mean, if I'd pick one, that's probably what I'd pick. It's like, no, you're wrong. All right, enlighten me. It's like, it's a claw hammer. Okay. It's like with a claw hammer, you can sharpen the claws on it, use it to cut down trees. You can dig with it. You can do something else with it. He's like, and you can throw it and kill small game like squirrels and rabbits. I'm like, have you ever done it? It's like, no, but you could. I'm like, all right, go kill a squirrel with a claw hammer from like 30 feet away.
Yeah.
Get back to me. But like that, yeah, like it's untested knowledge and untested confidence. So yeah, I'd say you're probably right. Like most guys think they could. I think the way a lot of people view survival, and this is not just like surviving in the woods. This is any case. This is urban survival. This is, surviving a grid down situation. This is being in combat, like tactical survival. Most people get the idea that their gear set is the most important. And they kind of view it like a pyramid. So like their gear is the base of the pyramid that holds everything else up. After that, it's, if they even think about skills like, hey, maybe I should go out and practice with this, or watch a YouTube video or something, that's the next step is their skills. And if they even think about it at all, at the top is like the little tiny capstone that really doesn't hold any weight at all is their mindset. Most people don't even think about that.
Yeah.
How I've always believed it, born out of my experience in the field, is that mindset is really paramount. That is the number one most valuable asset in any difficult survival situation. That should be the foundation bedrock of your pyramid. If you have confidence, if you can think critically, like come up with solutions, like if you're solution minded, if you can stay calm and not panic, if you can maintain positivity, especially in a group in the face of dire circumstances and keep the group morale up, all of those things, if you can persevere through and not get down on yourself when it sucks, like when it's 35 degrees and freezing rain and you're hypothermic and you hadn't eaten in 2 days and you don't know where you are, the choice of continuing to go and continuing to fight even though you're completely gassed versus just laying down to die that's in your mind. So mindset is paramount. And I teach this in all of my classes, that what I saw in the field bears that out, because there were people who didn't make it, who were on paper experienced outdoorsmen. They were hunters. They had been hiking before. They had the gear they needed, or at least adequate gear. Even if it wasn't great, it was enough to work with. You know, they could have self-rescued. They could have sheltered in place, but, you know, they either panicked or they gave up, and that led to either their demise or serious injury or whatever. And on the flip side, there were people who, on paper, like, had no business being alive. Like, they should not have made it. There are people with no experience. They were in terrible physical shape. They had medical conditions like you wouldn't believe. No gear, or like the worst stuff you could imagine. And they made it out. And the difference was their mindset. They believed they could. And they made that choice that no matter what happened, as long as they were still conscious and above ground, they were going to continue to fight. That was what made the difference for them. They came up with solutions to their problems. They stayed positive, all of those things. I think some people are naturally more inclined to that. But to a degree, like a great degree, I think that it can be learned, and it can be taught. Because, you know, if you think about all of our military special operations forces, like whether it's BUDS for the Navy SEALs, whether it's Ranger School, all of those are really as much or more about mental toughness and mastering your mind, so that you have full total control over it in the most stressful situations imaginable, than they are actual, like, skills. You know, they're about that too, but really it's self-knowledge and building mental strength and toughness. So that's why I harp on that massively. Yeah, the mindset piece is huge. Above that, yeah, for me, I would say skills. Yeah, your skill set next, because with the proper mindset and the proper skills, your gear really doesn't matter all that much. I know guys that you can drop them off in any given patch of woods with no clothes on, and within 2 weeks they'll come out having a full set of clothes, knife, shelter, cordage, all this stuff that they've just made themselves. They've just bushcrafted out off the land. And that's really hard if you've ever tried to do it. Like, it's exceedingly difficult. But between their mindset, they have the confidence that they know they will prevail, and they got the skills to do it. Yeah, that's all they need. And then lastly, your gear set, which is it's not meaningless. Like, quality gear really does matter. The weaker your skill set, like, the stronger your gear needs to be. It's kind of a flip of what Morris Kohanski, again, said. One of the quotes from him that I absolutely love is, the more you know, the less you have to carry, and the less you know, the more you have to carry. It's very true. But yeah, all other things being equal, like, your gear does matter. Buy the best stuff in certain areas you can afford. Some stuff really matters, some stuff does not. I tend towards being a gear snob, but also because I do this for a living and I can justify spending money on it. But yeah, so I invert the pyramid. I think that mindset is paramount and is more important than anything else. Your skill set is also vitally important. The more you know, the better time you're going to have. And actually that influences the mindset piece as well. And honestly, a huge part of what I do in my classes is, you know, helping give people that mental strength and confidence through empowering them with the skills. So it's like, when you have the skills, you gain the confidence. You know, it all kind of works synergistically.
Like, I agree with you that mindset is just paramount. And have you heard those stories about like a man and a horse, and they're both dehydrated, and then eventually the man keeps walking and pulling the horse along? You know, where, you know, many animals might just give up and just say, I'm spent. Like, if your mind is strong, you'll keep on going.
That's one of the things that makes us human, right? Because there's, I don't know how big of a nerd you are. If you've ever read Frank Herbert's Dune series, there's a quote from it, and it talks about the difference between a man and an animal is an animal in the trap will try to chew off its leg to get away and then bleed to death, whereas a man will stay in the trap and wait for whoever came and set the trap and make a weapon and kill him when he tries to free him from the trap.
Yeah.
It's like, that's true. You know, animals don't, it is our mind that makes us human. So yes, that's very true.
You know, would you say that more people are interested in survival, you know, now that we're in the year 2022, since, you know, 2020 happened? You know, back in the day, I used to tell people I would prep, and prepping means preparing for the worst, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, having emergency food. I use My Patriot Supply, and it's food that'll last 25 years. You know, I have gallons of water, and that's just kind of how I was raised. And when I got married, my wife's like, "What the heck are you doing? Like, why are you spending all this money on camping gear and whatnot?" And then
I
she
know
goes,
your wife, and she said the same thing to me back
"Yeah,
in the day.
isn't that funny?"
I'm
But
glad you came around.
she's learning that it's important. But I told you the story once where, you know, all the power grid went down. And so I go to this Dunkin' Donuts, and I noticed that there's a line for, you know, it's like a 3-hour line of people waiting to make their coffee, when all I had to do was just go home and just use my grill, and I heated up some water.
That's not even a survivalist thing. That's just common sense.
Yeah.
That's what's wild, is so many people just don't have that.
You know, with the shutdown, and, you know, we had scarcity. We had, you know, toilet paper started running out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know a lot of people were panicking. I was in this zone. I'm thinking, I'm just going to use old T-shirts and start cutting up rags. I mean, I don't mean to sound gross. So let's talk about like prepping and bugging out versus bugging in. And what are your thoughts?
So, well, I did want to say one thing on what you were kind of getting at before, as far as like the mainstreaming of it. Because in 2020, I was very, in a way, blessed, because my heart really went out to a lot of other businesses that had to close their doors, got shut down, whatever. We defied lockdown orders, but we had a flood of new customers. Like 2020 was a game changer for the business, because that was a springboard that I've been able to expand even now. Yeah. And like you said, like it's really gone mainstream in a lot of ways. And 2020 really accelerated that. It was on its way there for a while. I think maybe starting around 9/11, because, you know, I know most of my instructors are much older than I am. And, you know, they've been doing this forever. And, you know, back in the 80s and 90s, if you were like into survival or preparedness, you were weird.
Yeah.
Like, you were a strange dude. You were living in an off-grid cabin in Montana somewhere and had cut all contact with the world, and which actually sounds kind of nice. But yeah, it was definitely odd. Like, normal people did not do that. Even since I've been doing this, like, just the mainstreaming of it has become visible. I've gotten my audience, my student body has gotten more and more and more diverse as the years have gone on, and it's really people from all walks of life now. There's not really a type for preparedness and survivalism like there used to be. You know, it's all ages, all races, all genders. It's everyone has realized the necessity of it, which I think is a net positive. I think that's great. It's just common sense, and it's the world we live in. Definitely seeing it getting mainstream.
And I want to mention too, like, when the stuff started to hit the fan in March 2020, and we didn't know what was going on. You know, I went to my local gun store, and it was just packed, and there was literally nothing. And, you know, like, you couldn't even buy ammo from there. Nope. And a lot of people think, oh, you know, I'm going to see signs in the news, and then I'll buy a gun or I'll buy some ammo. So you and we're both Christians. I believe that self-defense is biblical. It says in Luke 22:36, Jesus said, "Sell your cloak and buy a sword." Mm-hmm. And, you know, there's also a part where Jesus is getting arrested, and, you know, Peter had a sword on him, and he cut off the soldier's ear. And, you know, of course, Jesus healed the ear and said, "Put your sword back, Peter." But the point is that Peter had a sword. He's walking around with the Messiah. And so why is it important that good people, whether you're a Christian or not, I'm just saying, someone who's a family person, someone who cares about society, why is it important for more good people to learn how to use guns wisely and safely?
Well, I would say first, there's no nobility whatsoever in victimhood. There's nothing in the Bible that says that we are to be taken advantage of in that way. But honestly, like the best example I can think of in recent events is whatever happened a week, 10 days ago, 2 weeks, the dude up in Indiana, but the guy that stopped the mass shooter at the mall. By all accounts, just a very normal, super clean cut, very upstanding young man, had a plain, unmodified Glock, but had trained with it a lot, and he was ready. And he knew how to get people out of his line of fire, get them behind him, and have accurate aimed fire at like 40 yards, which is not easy for a shooter. Like, that's a good shot.
That is a long shot.
And, sadly, there were still people that died because that was just how, the shooter just came in and started blazing. But, like, think of how many people were saved and how many people got to go home with their families. And it's really no different than it's doing these things that others may live. Yeah. Because evil is, until the end of time, is always going to exist in the world. And to say otherwise is just denying reality. And if you look at history, most of history is pure hell. Like absolute blood and slaughter and gore and total tyranny of whoever has power subjugating everyone else. Whether that's, roving bands of raiders on the Mongol steppes, whether it's the Soviet Empire, doesn't matter. For good people to not arm themselves and be prepared to do violence is only inviting those who would do evil to open the door. And that can be true on a micro scale with someone breaking into your house, or that can be true on a macro scale. There's no nobility in victimhood.
That's right. And there's a famous quote. It says, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener at war.
Very true.
Have your weapons, have your guns, be trained, and then pray you never have to use them other than just going to the shooting range. I love how you have a cat right now.
Yeah, my wife has cats. I have step cats, and this one's obsessed with me. So I can either just let him paw at my leg or I can pick him up. So he's just going to be spoiled.
No, I hear you. So we did talk about animals too playing an important role in survival. And
this cat is of no use in the survival situation.
Well, I will say my border collie, she's been helpful. I've never bought I have one sleeping bag. I can't remember what it's rated, but it's a summer sleeping bag. And I actually used the same sleeping bag during the summer, during the winter, whatnot. I was camping and I was freezing, and my survival mode, crept in. I was like, all right, well, this tent's going to keep me 10 or 15 degrees warmer. And correct me if I'm wrong. I had my dog, and then I'm thinking I need to just straddle her I mean, I held on to her tight. I also knew that my sleeping bag would work better if I had it zipped up. I'm just trying to trap all the heat I can, as opposed to having it unzipped, using it like a blanket. So how can animals help or not help in survival?
Well, people have had dogs as a helper since time immemorial. Whether it was just to stand watch outside the camp because their senses are so much better than ours. They'll smell and hear, and I think even sense, just intuitively sense stuff coming before we do. If you have a dog that knows how to hunt, that's very valuable. Even dogs that may not seem like it will actually jump to your aid if you're getting attacked. Like, that's valuable too. They can certainly have value. And if that's the case, like if your dog is well trained, well disciplined, it doesn't basically have special needs like special meds, special diet, can just eat whatever if it had to, that's an asset. If your dog is not any of those things, if it's poorly trained and undisciplined, if it has a biting problem, or if it steals food or gets into stuff or can't be around kids or other dogs or in stressful situations without freaking out, that's a liability. That's a real problem. So everything I teach is data driven. I don't just make stuff up and theorize it. Like, I always either look to my own experience, the experiences of other people in similar roles, or case studies, whether that's a wilderness survival case study or a post-disaster case study. And we've got tons of literature, especially like Hurricane Katrina was, an apocalyptic situation.
That's right.
Gold mine of data, of case studies, of stories, of people's things that they did or didn't do that helped them survive or made things worse. You see that a lot. People drowned because they were going back after their pets because their dog wouldn't come when it was called the first time. It freaked out. And so they went back in the house and the house got swept away. Okay. Personal example, like this cat is like the most harmless creature that ever lived. He's declawed. He has no teeth. He's diabetic and he's mostly blind. So like he's only going to live like 12 hours unassisted. So like if anything, and like the cats are like my wife's mental health. So like if anything happens, like gotta have insulin, gotta have their food, like gotta account for that.
Those are hard thoughts to think.
Yeah,
but, it's real talk.
And it gets even harder when you talk about like, okay, what relatives do you have that have to have like medicine to survive, or can't eat just whatever comes their way, they'll die. That's just a reality you have to acknowledge and plan for. And the sad thing is a lot of people don't. So, that's a like a holistic preparedness mindset. It's like, what can you do about that? And you asked about bugging out versus bugging in. We hadn't really gotten into it yet. But that's why I'm a much bigger proponent of bugging in than I am bugging out. In your group, if you have like young children, the elderly, anyone who's vulnerable, leaving your home base and all of the things therein, your four walls that you own and control and that you have secured, the odds that something bad is going to happen to one of them go way, way up statistically based on disasters that have happened in recent recorded history. So it's just stuff to think about. And I think that's a big part of why more people don't go into this is because they don't want to think through those scenarios. They don't want to have those conversations. I don't get that because I would rather really think it through and plan on it and face it head on and be ready. And that way I bring my people through as best as can be done rather than just be blindsided by it. But, I think that is part of it, that it's, it forces people to confront unpleasant realities.
Speaking about bugging in, so that's, when you decide like, hey, it's dangerous, but we're going to stay in our house and use our supplies and whatnot. In my own neighborhood, I've told my wife that like, I want to be friends with everyone anyways, but I'm strategically friends with my neighbors. I know that we can help each other. When I lived in Atlanta, there was once a situation where my car got robbed and a bunch of other cars got robbed, and me and all the neighbors were texting each other. I mean, because it's going to be a good 30 minutes to an hour before the police can come. And, you just want to make sure everyone's just communicating and everyone's safe.
Yeah, community is huge. And I think that's a very underrated part of all of this, especially when it comes to, because the wilderness survival part, like some people aren't outdoorsy. It doesn't really, they're never going to need that. But as far as like the urban survival and preparedness, that's for everybody.
Yeah.
Everyone should be thinking about that. And yeah, community is huge because at no point in human history have we gone it alone. The lone wolf idea is a complete fallacy. Like nobody has done that and survived. Like I always say, when talking about like small unit tactics and groups and all that, all these guys say, oh, I'm just, I'm on a wing and I'm going to go it alone. I don't trust anybody. I'm like, you got to sleep sometime, bro.
That's right.
You got to eat. You got to have downtime. You got to rehab your gear. You got to take care of whatever. Somebody needs to be watching your back. Because otherwise, you can only run for so long before somebody catches you at a vulnerable moment and you're done. Yeah. If things are really bad and you can pull together as a group, like you just don't feel so alone and it's easier to get through. And, maybe you have resources and tools and skills that you can pool and that you can share. Maybe one of your neighbors has a skill set that's relevant, or maybe it's you that does and you can be a blessing to them. It doesn't guarantee that things will continue to go smoothly, but it sure helps. Again, in this country, in this century, people have killed each other over basic goods. Like people in New Orleans post-Katrina shot and killed each other over bags of ice because their food was really bad. And it was their neighbors. But, if you know your neighbors and you're friends with your neighbors, it's a lot less likely that's going to happen. If you have a good relationship with it, you can be like, hey, we're in a really dire situation. Can you help us out? Rather than point a gun at you telling you to give up whatever you got. So yeah, making friends with people is a great idea. That's there's no downside there, really.
I feel like a lot of people don't camp, and let me explain it this way. I went to a Halloween party a couple of years ago, and literally it was 6 or 7 guys trying to make a bonfire, and they just couldn't get the fire to work. And now, in their defense, the wood was a little bit wet. It wasn't like it was firewood. It was just wood from the forest and whatnot. After about an hour, I just jumped in. I said, "Hey guys, do you mind if I have a go at it?" They're like, "Good luck, Derek." And I literally got the fire going in maybe 2 minutes. But that's because I built thousands of fires. And,
Right.
you know, I love fires, but I also know how to control them and whatnot. Don't you feel that the world would be a better place if we all went camping more often?
100%. I think it gives, and this is actually one of my biggest reasons why I recommend that people go backpacking. Like I don't do it as much anymore, but used to be a huge backpacker. I still recommend it. One of the big reasons is the level of gratitude that it gives you. One of the reasons that people really should try to go as light as possible. It's not the pack weight. Like, sure, you could handle an extra 10 pounds. It's the principle of making do with less and realizing that you can be happy and content and have a great time with the 25 or 30 pounds you're carrying on your back for days on end in gorgeous places. And you don't need all this stuff to be happy. It's a great perspective shift. And you come back just going like, oh man, like all this is, all this stuff, all these conveniences that we have, like this is nice, but I'm fine without it. Like it's cool. I don't need it. And it's a massive perspective shift, and it's so good. And I wish more people would have that. I think would be a lot less materialistic and a lot less consumption driven. Yeah, and even not backpacking, even just like go car camping. Like you still get some of that, but even then you still get the go someplace where there's no cell signal, especially. Everybody gets their nose out of their phones and stops scrolling Instagram and stops checking the news or whatever, and is just present with the people they're with. Cooking a good meal around a campfire, having a drink, just chilling out. Like that's the stuff of life right there. So yeah, absolutely, people should go camping more.
So you've gone backpacking. I've done it a couple of times. One time I went backpacking down Blood Mountain. Do you know where that is?
Oh, I've been Blood Mountain lots.
I mean, it was fun. It was amazing, but I got poison ivy, and then it just got bad, like to the point where my whole body was covered in poison ivy. And that's where you have to be mentally tough. I had 2 friends with me, and I just told the guys, I said, guys, like, let's finish the trail. Not just that whole trail, but yeah, I was just like, I'll be fine. And then, they ended up making me turn around, and we went to the hospital. It's also a powerful thing just to see what you're made of. Like when I got poison ivy, this was during the winter when we were camping, and I actually swam in a really cold lake. Just to see if I could get some of that poison ivy off, or at least be cold and not focus on my itching. Mm-hmm. Not that being wet's a good idea when it's the winter, but
if you know what you're doing, if it's controlled circumstances and you can get out of it, then there's nothing wrong with that. Just know yourself, know your skill level. But no, that's huge. And honestly, like talking about developing the mental toughness, coming full circle, developing the mental toughness to survive in whatever circumstances you may find yourself in, it's incremental. You're not going to just wake up one day and just be David Goggins, doing 240-mile ultra runs across Death Valley. Like he didn't get that way overnight either. Like you inoculate yourself to it, and you do that by feeding yourself ever increasing doses of discomfort. Like I remember my very first camping trip. I was in Cub Scouts. Looking back now, I think it was an overnighter car camping at Carter's Lake. And looking back now, it's like I would do that with like no preparation, I could just go and not give it a second thought. But back then, I was like a big deal. And then I look at like earlier this year, I did I think 67 miles of the Appalachian Trail in January. So I started off January 2nd. That's how I started the year, was I did a week on the AT. Comparing those two things, like, didn't get there overnight. So like you inoculate yourself to it. And that trip, like you said, just seeing what you're made of, it's a great confidence builder, because I went with minimal gear. I knew it was going to be cold, but I didn't know how cold it was going to be. It ended up being, I got hit by one blizzard, one ice storm, And
blizzard.
Yes,
Dude.
The day that I started off, it was like 70 something. Nice sunny Sunday afternoon, unseasonably warm. And I was like, I bet there's a storm coming through. And sure enough, probably 3, 4 a.m., the bottom just fell out. It was a huge, huge thunderstorm, and then it turned to blizzard. So I woke up to about 4 in the morning to like 3 inches of snow on my sleeping bag. So I brushed it all off and rolled myself up in a tarp, and then woke up after daylight to probably another 4 inches, like almost 8 inches of snow. In Georgia. All the rain from the night before, it had gotten so cold so fast that it froze as ice on the trail. So the trail was just ice. On the backsides of the mountains, the snow was drifted up like past my knees. And I didn't have crampons. I didn't have gaiters. I had nothing like that.
And you're by yourself?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I went solo. So, yeah, and it was just this insane trip. And it only got above freezing one day. The rest of the time, it stayed below freezing. And I know one night it got so cold. So your phone has a negative, like a shutoff temp for cold weather to protect itself. So I got to this campsite. I was building a fire because everything, I'd gotten wet during the day, long story. And I was building a fire and I set my phone off to the side. And within like 5 minutes, it had shut itself off for cold protection. And when I got back home, I looked it up to see the temperature that does that. And it was -4. The other thing I noticed was like I would melt ice or melt snow for water, and it would freeze like 15 minutes later. I'm like, bro, like that was just boiling.
Yeah.
And so I got a buddy who's from Maine, and I'm like, okay, cold. How cold was that? He's like, oh, that's at least like -15, -20 for it to do that.
Damn.
Okay. So, but yeah, I ended up with 4 frostbitten toes, and a couple other injuries like from slipping on the ice, but still pulled like close to 70 miles. And it was like, it set my year off to such a great tone. Like it was exactly what I needed.
Yeah.
It was like, I was loving it. I'm like, I'm so glad I did this. I wanted to put myself in a situation where I forced myself to rely on my skills, where I couldn't just bail if it got bad, where I could like actually conceivably die if I messed up. And really just like you said, just to like prove that I could do it. Yeah, that's a huge part of it, is, going out, and it's honestly like, as a man in 21st century America, in like the bubble wrap society we lived in, that's like one of the last big challenges that's available to anybody. Not every dude can go join the military and like try their hand at special ops. Not everybody can be a wild-end firefighter. Not everybody can go on like some crazy like polar expedition, like really go to the edge that way. But anybody can go like on a challenging trip out in the woods. You just like take less stuff with you. You can push yourself to the edge and really see what you're made out of. And like, I think that's awesome that anybody can still do that. There's no barriers there other than your own.
And you can work with their comfort zones or their comfort levels. So when Audrey and I got married and I wanted to take her camping.
Don't take your wife on the winter trip on the AT.
Yeah. That's
don't do that.
But I took her to Raven Cliff Falls, which is a really cool camping spot. She's like, you don't own a tent? I said, no, like I just make my own, or I'll do a hammock. And before I went camping with her, I dropped about $200. And so what we did was called glamping. Like we had an air mattress, but that was what she was comfortable with. I wanted to ask you, my son is 10 months old, but I'm already thinking about a rite of passage for him when he, becomes 13 or 14.
Oh,
and
awesome.
I think we're missing that in today's culture. So for example, one thing I want him to do is, like, dude, I'll tell him, Cade, you're a man when you can light a fire with one match.
I'd kick it up a notch and go bow drill fire personally, like friction fire.
There we go. I mean, another thing I want him to be able to do is be able to catch a fish, skin it, clean it, and cook it on an open fire. And then, Audrey was like, do you know how to do that? And I said, well, I used to do that as a teenager. That's one of my favorite things. What would you have for your son if you have one?
So I do have a lot of thought. I'm not as far along as you. We don't have kids yet, but Lord willing. And even, I've thought about this for years too. I'm on the same page as you. I would make it incremental. I would make it where, and honestly, you see this reflected in traditional cultures that still do rites of passage, like the Maasai or the San or the Yanomami or the Yakuts or any of these traditional cultures around the world that still do it, it's not just a once and done. It may culminate in like one big event. The more I learn about it, the more I learn that it's not just a rite of passage, it's how their lives are structured, because it starts when they're very young children. And, even after like the rite of passage to become a man, there's still more rites of passage. Like even as, they're getting away from it because there's just not enough lines left. But like as in the Maasai tribe, to become a man, become a warrior, you have to kill a lion. Like go out in the bush with a spear by yourself and kill a lion. But even then, like once you've done that and you're among the brotherhood of men, there's still other tests you got to pass. Like if you want to be a leader, if you want to lead other men into battle against other tribes, there's still other stuff you got to do, which is honestly like reflective of the truth of being a man. Is like you're never done. Masculinity is never a finished state. It's always aspirational. Yeah, I would say I'd make it a bunch of different things. I would start with small stuff. Like I would make them building their first fire like a big deal when they're like 5, 6, maybe a little bit older. Teach them how to shoot a gun, teach them how to use a bow and arrow. Make those things foundational to the things that will come later. So for the fire example, okay, because I teach kids all the time. Like I know like usually like when they can and can't do stuff. So if he's like 6 or 7, like using like a match or a ferro rod, that's a stretch. Like that's pushing it for a kid that young, but they can do it. So that's like that, it's a rite of passage at that age. Whereas, and then that builds like if he's 13, like I want him to make his own bow drill set. Like I want him to carve the hearth. I want him to split the wood to make the hearth board, carve the spindle, make the bow, string it, and then like build it like a block, and then wrap out a friction fire, because kids in the past could do that. If you look in the original Boy Scout manual from 1912, those kids, that was expected of them. I might teach him how to, like over the course of his childhood, teach him how to use an axe. And then at a certain point, like he fells his first tree, like first big tree, like, teach him how to cut down a sapling and how to do so responsibly and do so safely. But, when it's time for him to become a man, like he needs to know how to, drop a tree that's big enough to kill him. Once he knows how to do that with an axe, that's when he's ready to start learning how to use a chainsaw.
Right.
Obviously, I'm a hunter. So like first kill of any kind, like if it's a squirrel or a rabbit, like, good on you, son. You're on your way to becoming a man. Like, let's, treat it respectfully, cook it up. Let's eat it together.
Try to eat it.
Share this meal as men. This is something you should be proud of. And, this is something you should honor and not be wasteful of. Years later, teach him how to kill his first deer, how to dress that out, how to butcher it, not take it to the processor like I was told to do, but like actually learn how to start to finish, skin it out. I would just infuse his life with rites of passage. And, we talk about it in like the outdoor skills context, which I think is hugely important, because again, that's like one of the last bridges to the ancestors we got as modern men. Like that's one thing we can all, it's harder. It's easier for some people than others. Like, if you live out in the country, it's easier than if you live in the city, but like it's still accessible. So the outdoors thing is huge, but like it applies to all other areas of life too. Like, like teach him how to drive. Like that's a rite of passage in itself. Like when he drives for the first time, that's a big deal. All those things. But yeah, man, that's not, I can't pick out just one thing, because that's never how it was. It's like masculinity and skills, like the masculine virtues were always passed down like in increments from father to son, because there was so much to pass down. So I guess that's my answer, is I'd infuse them in and try to infuse and interweave as much meaning as possible into his childhood and adolescence.
Amen. And let me just say, like, even if God gives me a daughter in the future, I want her to learn how to build a fire. I mean, that's really important. And, I think it's attractive when a woman can survive and do things like that.
Well, and I've told my wife this, and, my wife came into our relationship knowing a lot of this stuff, because her dad is like straight up Colorado mountain man. Like he's probably killed more elk than most guys will ever see in their lifetimes. And he's got like no formal training. He's just like total, unassuming Colorado hippie mountain man. But he's got to be like one of the toughest men I've ever met in my life. And she grew up around that. And that was normal for her. So like when she met me and we got together and it's like, okay, here's what I do. A lot of people find that weird. She's like, no, it's not weird. I wouldn't say it's like her thing. She knows a lot of it, and what she did know, she picked up really fast. And I appreciate it because I know that she trusts me to do these things and that I can protect her and that I can take care of us should things ever go south. But I also know that if I'm not around, that she'll be okay. Yeah. And honestly, like that's a huge thing for me too, is like empowering others so that, you know, they can take care of themselves. You don't, I think this is a Jordan Peterson quote, but you don't make people safe by keeping them safe. You make people safe by making them competent. Yeah. So like everyone should know this, whether you ever like do it or not, whether it's not your thing. Like that's my answer to a lot of women who don't want to learn. Most women do want to learn this stuff. Actually, I've found. Well, of course, maybe that's just because when I meet them, they've signed up for a survival class. But most women are into it. But the ones I talk to, they're not. They're like, oh, my husband knows all that. He'll take care of me. I'm like, well, what if your husband's not there? Like, exactly. What are you going to do then? But like, my daughters aren't going to get any different of a skills education than my sons are. They're all going to learn how to shoot. They're all going to know their way around the woods. They're going to know how to fight. They're going to know how to fix cars and fix everything else that goes wrong. Like, they're going to know the same stuff. But again, you know, I may just tell. The story I tell may be different. There's no reason they shouldn't know it too.
So how can people get in touch with you?
So I know I sent you this, so it's going to be in the notes somewhere, but best place is honestly my website, www.sarcraft.com. It's SARCRAFT. I would say just go there because my socials are linked on there. My contact form goes straight to my email. You know, there are other people in the company besides me, but I still do, you know, run the business. I am the full-time employee. So that's the best way to get a hold of me. I am on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Definitely check me out there. You know, best way to not miss out is go to the website, sign up for the email list. That'll get you connected. Yeah, awesome. We got classes running all the time. Yeah, we're located conveniently north of Atlanta in Canton, Georgia. We're about 45 minutes north of the city. It's very easy to get to. Offer overnight camping. So if you're in the metro area, very easy to come check us out.
Cool. And do you have any cool merchandise that you want to recommend that someone buys?
I do. My online store is not up and running at the moment. But I do have a retail space in Canton. So if you're up this way, I highly recommend checking it out. It's at the Cotton Mill Exchange, booth number 6 in historic downtown Canton. And I've got pretty much everything I would have on the website anyway. I've got all the SARCRAFT swag. I've got knives. I've got other woods tools. I've got survival gear, just a mix of everything. Yeah, just go check it out. There's a lot of cool stuff you'll find there.
Well, I want to buy a SARCRAFT knife from you and then one day give it to my son when he's ready. So
I'm working on the SARCRAFT knife. That's going to come. I know a lot of custom manufacturers. I know a lot of guys in the industry. I just got to pick which one of them I want to make my knife.
Well, let me know. I'll be the first to buy it. All right.
Hey, I will. Hey,
well, thanks so much for coming on the channel. You rock, and we'll definitely be in touch. All right.
Yeah, man, this has been fun. Thanks for the opportunity.
I'm in the interior of the vast Pennsylvania wilderness. I've brought with me only the bare essentials, a knife, a roll of duct tape, in case I need to fashion a shelter or make some sort of water vessel.